So today's topic is understanding and improving employee turnover. We're going to talk a little bit about our company, TrenData, and then we're going to dive right into industry data, turnover, good versus bad, retention strategies, technology assistance, give you a quick demonstration of our utilities, and we'll open it up for questions and answers at the end of the conference. TrenData is headquartered in Richardson, Texas. Other companies are headquartered here: Fossil, State Farm Insurance, Cisco Telecom, Raytheon Aerospace. So we're quite a little tech hub here, sitting right outside of Dallas, Texas. We launched the company in October 2017, and we focus on AI-driven people analytics in a cloud offering, and we'll dive into that more later as well. Here are a few of our partners. We've got several in healthcare and in finance, but we really play all over where there's concern with staff health, turnover, and high competitive markets. So quickly, let's talk about turnover and what the definition of turnover it is. It's simple calculation of taking the number of separations for a period of time and dividing that by the average number of employees for that same period of time. The important step here is to be consistent with your calculations. You can trend this monthly, quarterly, annual basis, but as you start to trend over time, make sure you're leveraging the same division or group of employees by the same allot of time so you can get an accurate trend to really judge what's going on in your talent position. We've got a 5-year history from salary.com and CompData. There is an interesting trend. We'll start breaking this down here, but at a high level, in 2014, the annual turnover average was 15.7%. Fast forward just 4 years to 2018, and we've gone up to almost 20%, 19.3. That's over a 3% gain in just 4 years. As we break that gain down, we see a little bit more that good news is the layoff rate is on a steady decline. Was at 1.5% in 2010. As we enter 2018, it's approaching 1%. But what really has the market worried, concerned, is the voluntary quit rate. And we see that quickly outpacing the involuntary termination rate. As we break this down by industry, in the bottom section, you can see the involuntary terminations. But the top section, roughly 2/3 of all terminations in 2018 were voluntary. This is growing, as you could see by the previous chart, with an expectation by 2020 annual turnover rates of 30% voluntary turnover. Now let's talk about good versus bad turnover for a moment. So if we draw a matrix and we separate our talent staff by the way they perform annually, high, average, and low, and we draw that out over time, we can also look at the more turnover we have in our high performance market, that is concerning to the business. What's not as concerning is turnover in the low performing talent pool, but both should be watched because turnover can have other implications. One of the key areas here is that in the first year of employment, there's really little or no performance data. We need to focus on onboarding, we need to focus on training and mentoring. 25% of your new hire pool are gone within the first 6 months of employment. This can be a number of reasons. It's important not to scrutinize that too much as the talent pool shifts quite a bit. So the key is to bring them on and to groom and then set them up so you get a baseline to start measuring their performance after year 1. So things to focus on in training and onboarding is not only the teaching of the career curriculum, but also the observation of the students and the staff. This can be done through little quizzes and tests. We're not talking about any kind of SAT or lengthy certification style tests, but just little questions here and there to measure engagement, measure the employee's willingness to learn. Focus on group projects where they can feel part of a team, where it's not necessarily one employee trying to outperform another employee, but necessarily a group of them functioning as a unit trying to succeed together. And as you go through that first year, think about periodic refreshers. This can be done quarterly, semi-annually, but it's important to make the employees feel like there's continued investment in their education and professional development. One of the main ways to focus on professional development is mentorship. So this is really a twofer in the fact that you get to judge the mentor on their ability to lead and the mentee on their ability to learn. So it's very helpful. One of the biggest ways to learn is to teach, so that helps your senior staff. It also gives you another opinion on the employee's development. So maybe their manager isn't as involved with them on a daily or weekly basis. So the manager can now defer to the mentor to find out if the employee is really developing as you would expect. Another bonus is that you get to see the mentor's development and interrelation with employees to get a better indicator of whether or not they would make good management material. And we'll back to our quiz segment. We've got a couple of $10 Starbucks gift cards that we will hand out at the end of the presentation, or we'll email them to you. So the first one is if you can name the movie that you have seen in the presentation window. If you just want to text that in, the first person to put that in the chat window as part of the session will reach out to you after the presentation and get you that gift card. I see Kathy is the first one that pops up on, everybody knows, good. And those are the little things to test engagement, as I was talking about earlier. You get quick responses, so thank you for all of that. Back to the career matrix, employee development. So as we move forward into the second year of employment, year 1 to year 2, we start to see our employee pool differentiate themselves. So we'll have our own performance metrics, and the pack will separate into high performers, typical employees, and underperformers. And it's important to both track, monitor, and develop. So for the underperformers, putting career improvement plans in place. For the average performers, it's still good. I mean, while they're good employees, but definitely want to invest in their development and see what it takes to push them up into the upper echelon. And for those high performers, make sure you can continue to nurture those performers, as turnover in this area is the biggest impact on professional corporate outcomes. So as we look at retention and we put the growth strategies in place, we kind of have a perfect world scenario here, but as the first 3 years of employment transpire, what you want to see in an ideal setting is your high performing pool increase, your average pool kind of sustain, and those low performers either move up the food chain into average or high performers, or ultimately leave the company. That's what we talk about, the good turnover. So turnover towards the bottom edge of the matrix is acceptable. What you really need to be concerned about is turnover in your high performing pool, the top edge of the matrix. That's where you're really losing a lot of company investment. Some key things to keep an eye out in turnover, back on the good side. So we do want to look about environments that, depending on where they come in the measurement and assessment, are things to be concerned about because of how they impact the other employees. First and foremost, the toxic employee. These are the ones that they may perform well on their own, but they're not necessarily a team player. We want to look at multipliers in the field and not necessarily diminishers, where we want to bring a whole team of people with us. So that's something to catch early to see if you can work on interpersonal skills and help them out, so that maybe mentorship. But again, that's a concern, because you definitely don't want to take someone too toxic and put them in a role where they're possibly chasing out developing employees. Another area, weak managers. So these are managers that really become more subjective and aren't as objective. The biggest concern here is that you may have soft-spoken high performers that don't necessarily stick up for themselves on performance reviews. And unless the manager is skilled enough to tease that out, there could be a reaction where the manager just gives high marks to the employees who demand it. And what you'd see then in your turnover data is you've got a population of high performers that are not as engaged in the company and may be at risk to leave because they're not being recognized accordingly. As well as, last but not least, protected employees. These are commonly employees that come through buyouts and acquisitions where they have a contracted vesting period of which they have to stay with the company before they can move on. This can just have a personal conflict where they might not be happy with the new business, but at the same time they're going to stay because they're on a vesting schedule. And so they might not be as fruitful to development and collaboration as the other employees in the organization. The next pop quiz for the first person who can name the character that is displayed on the screen. We've got a $10 Starbucks gift card for you. All right, Justin, super fast. All right, so retention strategies. These are some of the top survey responses in terms of what helps keep employees engaged in the business. First and foremost is training and career development. This might come as a surprise, but as more industry metrics come out and you see companies, leading companies really paying at or above industry standards, that the focus from the staff really moves on to what am I going to do tomorrow? It may be an okay job today, but they're smart enough to realize if the company isn't investing in their development, then they see the writing on the wall as that they're just waiting around. And then the concern comes their next position. So they really, we'll get into some of those details here in a minute, but career development is a good chunk of where your employee development needs to focus. Next does come back to paying at or above the market. So market data is everywhere. You can Google it. Headhunters have it immediately. We know that while you can offset that different benefit, different vacation plans, that there is something to paying what is market acceptable. Otherwise, headhunters just can't be controlled anymore. And last but not least, flexible hours and telecommuting. So with the millennial generation, there is a huge focus on work-life balance, and that doesn't necessarily mean time off work, but it does equate to giving me the flexibility if I just need to do paperwork or if I need to catch up on reading or training, and it's something like a webinar that I can do on my own time. Do I really need to be in the office at my seat? Do I have to be there at 8, 9 o'clock sharp? Or is this an area where I can take a couple days for just personal development, catch-up days, and come in on my own flexible times or work from home? So we've got a 2017 survey, and this was done by, I'll find that here in a second, buried in my notes. But it looked at top reasons in exit surveys for why employees will leave the workforce. And as I mentioned earlier, number one is career development. We really see that. And when you look at the percentage, I mean, the next one, work-life balance, is a distant second. You're talking about 8 percentage points between the two. So you want to focus on that. It's a good area to invest. Make sure you're investing, because the caveat with career development is also upward mobility. So once they do have additional skill sets, they want to know that employment-wise, there's a place for growth where they can move, not just lateral, but vertical moves. Coming back to that work-life balance, and one that's on the rise is manager behavior. I spoke about that a little bit earlier. Weak managers or managers that just don't understand the current climate of how to nurture. In past generations, we tended to be a little bit tougher on staff, and in the current generation, really the focus is on growth and being a team player, not so much as an I player. And so you see those rise. And then after that, you see we kind of get into the minutia. Everything sits around 7 to 9% in terms of well-being. And there, that compensation and benefit doesn't rank until 5th on the list. All right, cost of losing high performers. So these are some big areas. We've got SHRM, Society for Human Resource Management, and they talk about things to consider. Even when it's quote unquote good turnover, you still have to consider what that costs your business. Once you invest 6 to 9 months and you actually get an employee to become productive in the workplace, that's time and effort, which also equates to cost. So by simply letting that go, it's not only 6 to 9 months of development effort, but also the cost you've invested. And that's where we come back to, for every employee that turns over, it costs the business between 90 to 200%. So 1 to 2 times their salary is what you're losing. So make sure that if you're taking the time to bring somebody in, you're also taking the time to develop them so that you can start to get the business benefit back from staff, which doesn't occur until after year 1. There's another big piece around intellectual capital. So everything that you've done to train that employee now has in their head and is going on to another market. So they're not necessarily hard skills in terms of what your specific corporate IP is, but they're also grooming areas like how to run a lead funnel. And so once you take the time to educate sales staff, that's a skill they can repeat anywhere they go, and it will help them in their future career development. And then last but not least, impact on morale and culture. So if good employees are leaving, that leaves a mark on employees that stay behind. Back to the age of the internet rather. Everybody Googles, and so they're going to look you up on LinkedIn. They're going to find out where you went. Then they're going to Google the company, and it's on a slide coming up here. But about 50% of your employees are looking for opportunities at any given time. So let's talk about how technology can come in to assist. So we've all seen the spreadsheets and the lumps of data that tell us, here's what our employees are, here's what they rank. The challenge is it's not readily digestible information. You can go in, you can run a report, you can pull a query, and you can get a number. But what I need to know is, how does that number equate to my operations, to my productivity, to my standard workforce? So visualization is key here. Having a dashboard where you can put up key metrics, you can understand the whole picture to quickly understand, is this a typical or an acceptable problem? Is this something as it equates to recent activity with the company? Or is this something that really is alarming that we need to get a handle on before it continues down the trend? And also modeling scenarios. So newer solutions, TrenData being one of them, we have a state-of-the-art modeling engine, which this allows you to then forecast. So much like a weatherman, you get to see the trends, and what you want to know is how long are these trends going to continue, and are you going to get hit by this storm, or are you going to avoid it? So being able to put in different investment options, whether it's in staff, whether it's in development, whether it's in work-life balance, and understand specifically on your workforce the expected outcomes to know whether or not these are good investments. So to the TrenData solution, we have 3 key aspects to what we bring to the table to really try to connect and simplify HR forecasting and decision making. First is what we call our intelligent data gathering. And this helps because we've got disparate systems. Slowly but surely we are working to unify these, but in most scenarios, there's still separate systems that we bring the reports together today. So we can ingest the data from your HRIS, finance, talent management, and start to aggregate that data to give you a bigger picture of your current talent situation. We can then weigh that against external information, such as benchmark and survey data, to let you know not only how you're doing, but how you're doing compared to the industry. From there, we bring in a natural language processing engine. This is one that we're all used to in our voice assistants, where we can ask the simple questions, such as, what are my leading indicators of turnover? What will help me retain my high performers, and the system can break that down and actually bring the data back for you. It also helps in the processing and consumption of the data to help normalize, to bring disparate systems with different indicators so that we can correlate the information to bring you the metrics that you're looking for. And then as I've discussed, and we'll continue to discuss, the predictive modeling engine. This is really the big one. So we know now where we are, and we've been able to get that data for a while now. What we really want to know is where we're heading. So this is what helps us look at as we go through 2019 and start to focus on 2020, where can I put my investment dollars that will have the greatest impact on employee development and employee retention? We run these cycles on our AI platform, which continuously runs scenarios through the data month over month as we get fresh data to help true up and understand where the system is predicting the outcomes will go to where the outcomes actually went, making machine learning corrections to the algorithm to then evolve as we get more and more data to a prescriptive system to where you actually build faith and confidence that these forecasts, unlike the weatherman, are something that you can bet on year over year for your budgeting dollars. The problem statements, these are, across all employers and all industries. How do I retain these top performers? As I mentioned earlier, 51% of current employees are engaged. The tools that are online, the profiles that are online, LinkedIn, it's a free-for-all when it comes to recruiters, and in industries that are in high demand, they are getting calls and emails, sometimes multiple times a day. So if they're not happy or if they have concerns about their current employment environment, there's definitely fruit being dangled in front of them. Next, from an internal capture perspective, where do we go to recruit the best people? So one of the keys here is not necessarily quantity, but we have to look at quality. So when we go back to what these turnover rates are and the cost of my investing in new talent, if 33% of my pool is going to quit after 6 months, then where do I find more people that I can retain that are interested? And so having the analytics that will look at all your sources, weigh that against your terminations to then tell you, well, you may be getting a lot of your new employees from online job boards, that those same job boards are also your highest turnover rate. And so continuing to invest in those job boards may not be the best decision for your company. And then back to budgeting. How do I maximize my HR spend? So looking at, we're all on a fixed budget. We all have to spend our money wisely as we go into development for the next year. And where do I put that money to give me the best return on my investment? On the prescriptive side, let's take a minute to talk about problems and actions, and we're going to bring in the natural language processing to really see how it all comes together. So first and foremost, we all want to ask, how do we retain more high performers? The system can ingest that question and return a chart to then let you begin a modeling scenario. So in this example, we've got a chart that shows us increased turnover in our high performers. And we want to look at how we can bring that in line, help reduce it, because that's a concern for the business. So in this modeling scenario, we work with 3 variables: salary, our remote work from home policy, and our professional development. And we can model multiple ways to then see that while our non-high performer turnover is still higher than we would like, the important part is that we're driving down the high performer turnover. And this leads us to simple questions like, why not give bigger raises? If I'm looking to improve my turnover, let's just pay people more. We can also take that question and break it down to help you answer what your assumptions may be with actual data. The reason simply paying people more in this situation is that based on industry averages, you're already paying at or above. So these employees are not leaving for pay, that are leaving for opportunity. So continuing to try to invest just straight compensation in them is not answering what your employees are looking for. Getting started with solutions, so that becomes the next challenge. How do you bring this in and start to look at your data? So we've got 3 pillars here at TrenData. We look at being quick, simple, and insightful. We've got APIs to all major HRIS systems and other data sources. We'll get into that in a second as well. But in the turn-on, it's a cloud solution, and we also have flat data file imports. So as soon as your account is created, you can bring in a CSV file and begin working with your data on day one. We also have a responsive user interface, and we work on the simplicity where we can get in, everything is actionable, most data is just 2 clicks away. And then with the insight and the modeling, the goal here is to help you save on professional services. A lot of BI dashboards can help you see the data. You usually need someone to help you out with that. We try to simplify the whole process so that you can really pre-built metrics as well as the ease of creating new metrics. Have your own dashboard up and running quickly and simply. With that, I'm going to jump into the demo. And let's start quickly here with our connectors. You can see most main HR systems here right on the connect. There are others. These are just a sampling of what we have on the dashboard. So if you don't see yours here, not a problem. We can certainly turn on those APIs. So those are real-time connections to your HRIS system so that we can pull data on regular intervals to keep the data within TrenData fresh. At the bottom, we have external. We've got connectors to SurveyMonkey, so you can get those exit data. We also got U.S. Bureau of Labor and Statistics, so that you can get the industry average as well as salary.com. This really helps when you do your benchmarking against other organizations. And then for quick up and running, we have our TrenData universal file format. As mentioned earlier, this is our CSV flat file. So you can take any data from any system, put it into Excel, and simply load it through this utility here to begin to get up and running as soon as possible, even refresh data. So let's jump back to the dashboard. So all of these are movable tiles. They're designed to look at your data and allow you a quick, easy snapshot of the health of your labor force. So at the top, we have some number statistics that quickly tell us key metrics. So our staff, 1,027. Anytime we have a rec, back to what is our delay in productivity, on average right now, we're running 40.2 days to fill a position. And then we can bring in the financial data. We can also equate, this is our current cost to fill these positions, $4,500. And then baking back to the business value, we can attribute over $300,000 is the revenue per our employees, the benefit to the company. We get into sourcing as we look to fill these recs, and we can see that job boards end up being our #1 source component. So we have a nice little dial here. You can break out all your key components. Everything here is actionable on the screen. So if you want to see into the hard numbers, you can jump right down into the details to see that here's our percentage of female sourcing, here's our male sourcing, and as we break it down, we've got job boards leading both. We've got 195 females being sourced, and we've got 182 males. And then some interesting things like the job fair leads LinkedIn for the females, but the job fair and LinkedIn are really on par for the males. So that helps you break down your sourcing. Going back to the dashboard, we can look at this turnover rolling 12 average. So here's an area that we may want to dive into. We're seeing this turnover month over month for the past year just steadily increase. Again, we can dive in. We can immediately look at the metrics. We can open it up, and we can look at based on performance. So we switch our grid over, and now we're seeing our turnover on performance. And for the first 6 months of the year, we're seeing is non-high performer turnover is still high. Something at this point that you may want to be concerned about, but the less concerning part is that the high performer stayed relatively low. The interesting piece here and the concerning piece is that as of September last year, we start to see our high performer turnover grow to the point where last month our high performer actually outpaced our non-high performer. This is where it's really starting to put the company at risk. We also have the ability to do an events overlay to say, okay, what is it outside of just straight turnover that may be impacting our employee base? And we see that the first half of the year, we did a company acquisition. And while the first half of the year may have led to our non-high performer turnover, that there's a trickle-down effect that perceived may be affecting our high performer turnover. With this, we can also expand our horizon to say, okay, have we ever seen anything similar to this in the past? And when we go back, we see that, yes, we also did an acquisition back in 2016. And from 2015 to 16, we saw an uptick in high performer turnover with that acquisition. Now we see that continue through 2017, but now here in 2018, it's increasing again with our Redco acquisition. And the concerning part into 2019 is that it's continuing to grow and looking to outpace the non-high performer turnover. So from here, let's go back to the 1 year. And now let's look at the predictive component. So we want to begin to model. So we see our turnover increasing, and now the question is, what can I do about it? And I want to invest in the right areas. So we can look at why not just give bigger raises. So as we talked about earlier, the challenge with giving a bigger raise, as we see reflected in this model here, is that we're already paying at or above industry average. So plugging in the numbers and showing what we can expect, a $3,000, even a $5,000 a year raise to employees really doesn't impact the staff that much. Initially, we see a little bit of a drop in that first month turnover. They're happy to get it, but the overall impact to turnover just reduced it, not even a percentage point, 0.2%. So when we look at an organization of 1,000 people and we just invested $5,000 per employee, that's a $5 million investment, and all we did was get 0.2% of our retention. So let's go ahead and back that out and say, you know, we've had a really good view and use of our remote employee policy. We've got 34% engaged. What happens if we bump this up another 10% and get 45% engagement? So we can see back to some of these themes of things like work-life balance, that by increasing our work from home policy, we're able to have an immediate impact and long-lasting impact on employee turnover. Not only do we see the trend reverse, but we see it also decline over time. Let's come back up to the grid, and we're going to break this out also by performance, because one of the big concerns here is that we want to impact the high performer turnover. Non-high performer turnover is good to reduce that, but the high performer turnover is really what we're looking to impact. And we can see here that that work from home policy, while it affected the non-high performer, it really hasn't done much in our high performer category. So that's an area that we want to be sensitive to. To that point, coming back to professional development. While we have a program and we've rolled the program out, for whatever reason, it's still not being widely adopted. We have less than 7% engagement with professional development. What if we look at putting additional attention on professional development and rolling that out, making sure our managers are getting our staff engaged, making sure our staff is aware that not only being a high performer matters, but we're also willing to invest in them at the high performer level. So now when we go up to the forecast, we see the trends we're really looking to achieve. We've immediately brought high performing turnover back in line with overall turnover. And another key important trend to watch here is that not only have we dropped it below non-high performing turnover, but we also see the trend line come back to acceptable levels quicker, where month over month we're seeing high performing turnover is declining. We're able to retain that staff group at a larger rate. And so this, from investment and budgeting, it really helps you make the decisions in terms of, this is the population I'm looking to retain. This is how these investment dollars help us focus on retaining that. And back to the earlier scenario, $5 million spent on a strategy that really doesn't help retain staff is not a good investment. Real quickly, jump back to the dashboard. We also have a nice alerting feature. So for simple things like, I want to look at my cost per hire and I want to set a simple alert. I can immediately come in here and say that I want to know if my cost per hire exceeds $5,000. And by saving this alert, each month, each time we do a data load and a refresh, that our cost per hire exceeds $5,000, it's going to send you an email so that you know to come in and check to find out what is going on with your trends. All right. Just taking a quick look at time, that's about as far as I'm going to go in the demo today. We can break down tiles. Again, everything is actionable. We can immediately jump into the data behind the scene in terms of our staff mix, but I'll leave this open. At the end, I'll give you contact information, and should you have more questions and want to see more of the tool, please reach out and let us know. We'd be happy to schedule a one-on-one demonstration with you and get to know your specific system environment. With that, I'd like to open it up for some questions and answers. Excuse me. Got to get that console back opened up. There we go. So back to the chat window. If you want to just chat in any questions that you may have, I'd be happy to address them. All right, while we're letting those chat questions come in, we'll skip to the quiz answers. I think everyone got it. So our first scene was Goodwill Hunting. And our toxic employee, a very well-known toxic employee, Dr. Gregory House. All right, from Suzanne on the call, I got the question, are you able to overlay pulse and engagement survey data? So yes, we're able, in the overlays, we're able, jump back to the demo real quick, to bring quite a few things on top. So go back to this dashboard. We'll get into our turnover metrics. And now I can bring up my events manager. And so from my events manager, I can bring in information such as organizational events, recruitment events, marketing data, and social. So this is where you can overlay. And then once you come back to, so here on engagement scores, bring in on drill down, we've got our configuration. Excuse me for a second while we get through what data is available in our demo environment here. I can bring up. So in the filter configuration, you'll see this little checkbox right here that allows you to put in the events overlay. So any events that you have configured will then show up on your screen that you can share and put in your dashboard. All right. I've got another question, Infor connector. Yes, we have Infor connectors, as I mentioned earlier. We put a lot of our, just to keep the busyness down on the tiles, we have a lot of our connectors displayed here, but not all of them. So for any connectors you're interested in, by all means, reach out to us. We set them up with an API connection and we get into your environment Now that can take a little bit of time to turn on all those connections. So as I mentioned earlier, to expedite data loading, we have our flat file load that we can get you up and running in just a matter of a day or two. All right. And segmenting union and non-union employees. Yes, we can actually segment based on whatever data elements you load to us. So you send us the employee profiles, you get in and you understand what your employee mix is, and we can then come down and real quickly segment. So we've got an example of this here in this demo environment of ethnic diversity. So we've loaded in our ethnic information, and in this scenario, you could also see how it would translate to union versus non-union, and you could overlay and put that right into the population so you could understand how your staff breaks down. Another question just popped up for the ADP marketplace. Yes, we are in the ADP marketplace. So if you have additional questions on that, by all means, let us know and you can find us there. All right, go back to the question pane. All right, I don't see any last questions flowing in. I will leave that open as I go back to the presentation. So I'd like to thank everyone for their time. And if you have a question and you couldn't get to your computer or you weren't sure how to ask it, by all means, you can follow up with us directly at info@TrenData.com. Again, this is Andrew Davis. I'm the head of product management for TrenData. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Have a great day.